So what I'm going to talk to you about this time is what trauma is. As a trauma expert, I can tell you that a vast majority of people in our culture, in our country, really don't understand what trauma is, actually internationally, I would say. When people think of trauma, they think of car accidents, they think of natural disasters, and those are traumatic. However, there are other forms of trauma that are much more insidious in terms of how they present themselves and how they impact the person, the brain. For example, developmental trauma is basically chronic stress over the developing lifespan of a human being. And so you kind of look at the world around you and you say, well, what is stressful? And stress is based on the perception of the individual and their resources and the strengths that they have to be able to cope with any one particular stressor. So in many regards, developmental trauma is happening to quite a lot of people. And how do I know this? Well, because in working in school systems and working with professionals and people in the community, what I'm seeing in schools is that an increasing dynamic of angry, aggressive, reactive kids. And one of the things that I've kind of tied it to is really an ever-increasing exposure to stressful content, to violent content, whether it be through the computers, through television, through games. The truth is that kids are being exposed to this at ever-increasing rates. And if you think it's not affecting their neurology, if you think it's not affecting their regulatory systems, you're wrong. It absolutely is, and most teachers will tell you this. If you ask them, if you've been working for 25 years as a teacher, have you seen kids getting progressively worse in terms of their anger, their behavior, their mood, their ability to focus and sustain attention? So what trauma is trauma is basically, on the whole, developmental trauma is a type of trauma, but what trauma is it's any experience that a human being has that overwhelms the person's capacity to be able to manage that stressor. So this is why different people can handle different stressors and trauma in different ways, because everyone's different. Everyone has a unique set of genetic dynamics. They have a unique set of life experiences. They have a unique set of coping resources and skills. And based on those things, some events will be traumatic and some events will not be. Or they won't impact the person at a deeper neurological level. Another thing you need to know about trauma is that trauma is what they call non-declarative memory. It is not the thought in your head. So if you think about the most traumatic event you had in your life, the thought that rises in your mind is not the trauma memory, which is not the predominant way that it's stored in the brain. Trauma memory is non-declarative, which means to not say memory. So it's sensory memory. It's a taste, a touch, a feeling, a sensation. It's associated with the five senses. When a person experiences trauma, their brain encodes, a flashbulb encodes billions of bits of sensory information in that moment in an effort to create a template within which the person can use to evaluate potential events in the future. And so what you see is that why do people get continually reactive in certain environments, certain situations? It's because the trauma memory, the sensory memory is being triggered and that person is reacting as if they're re-experiencing that particular event in their past. I tell people this, if you resonate on that memory that you brought up in your mind, the thinking memory of that, if you resonate on it long enough, what will happen is you will actually start to feel something in your body. You'll feel anxiety. You'll feel some kind of stressor, some kind of bodily sensation. That's actually the tip end of the trauma memory, the non-declarative portion of that memory. It's this type of memory is much more permanent, much harder to access, much more unconscious. I always tell people in my trainings that if you want to understand what non-declarative memory is or trauma memory, go home and unlearn riding a bike. And then when I say that, people kind of chuckle a little bit, and they say, well, that's kind of funny. That's impossible. And I say, yeah, I think it might be, or it's very hard at least. And that's because riding a bike is what they call procedural memory. And procedural memory is very similar to trauma memory or non-declarative memory. It's stored in a different part of the brain, harder to access, harder to deal with. So that's what trauma is.